Okay, so we're at the point where we're finally ready to get our hands dirty. In this video, we'll learn how to use the different tools in LEGO Digital Designer. Now, if you only watch one video in this training series, make sure it's this one, as we'll be covering some of the more tricky tools to use, like the Flex and Hinge Align tool, which, if you've used this software before, it can be quite frustrating. So here we are in the welcome screen of LEGO Digital Designer. We can see that we're presented with 3 tabs. For the duration of this training series, we're going to be primarily focused with just working in here, the Mindstorms tab, but since we're here, it's worth explaining what these other tabs do. The first tab is referred to as the Digital Designer tab, and in essence, if we create a new project here, we are given the complete palette of all LEGO parts. Now, I'm not going to say all LEGO parts, but I mean a good many of them are here. We can see things like, all of a sudden I have a collection of doors. If I scroll really down, this doors list just goes on, and now there's more windows. And I don't even want to know what's going to happen here with the minifigures, but here we can see that I almost have too much choice. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be limiting our brick palette to just the pieces that are in the Mindstorms kit. This Digital Designer Extended tab, just to spend a second describing it, allows us to work with custom bricks. That is, bricks that wouldn't exist normally in a physical LEGO kit. So here, for example, we can play with different color stylings for pieces, like having bricks that are in hot pink, that kind of thing. So I'm going to come into the Mindstorms tab, and we have a couple of options here. I can normally open a project if I've been working in one previously, or I can start a new project. I'm actually going to select one of the ready-made sample robots that comes with LEGO Digital Designer. So let's choose this Whacker Tribot and see what this looks like. So here's our ready-made robot. We're going to see here that we have a couple of different ways that we can navigate around our project. And actually what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to hide my Windows toolbar so that we can maximize our screen space. Okay, there we go, much better. So here at the 4 corners of our screen, we have directional arrows that allow us to rotate around our object, and of course I can use these arrows here at the top and bottom. Might be very difficult to see, but there's actually a plus and a minus that will allow us to zoom in and zoom out from our project. Alternatively, if you do not like using these on-screen buttons, you can also achieve the same result by having the numlock button pressed and by using the 4, 8, 6, and 2 keys to rotate our model. The plus and minus keys with numlock turned on will allow us to zoom in and out. And if I press the 5 key, it will reset our view. But my personal favorite is actually using the mouse. To me, that's the most intuitive thing to do. And so let's talk a little bit about the mouse navigation here. Again, I can rotate my model in any direction by right-clicking on my mouse. So here you can see I'm giving this thing a spin. Of course, if I move my mouse up and down and right-click, I can also spin it in this direction. I can zoom in and out. If I have a mouse with a track wheel in the middle, I can zoom in and out by moving the track wheel. And I can also pan my camera. Now in the simulator, this is called trucking. But if I hold down the Shift key and right click, we can see that I can pan my model across the screen. So that covers navigation. There's a couple other things I just want to touch base on. You can see that as my mouse hovers over the various elements that make up this model, that I get some selection highlighting. So you can see that here I'm on this Technic beam, and now I'm on the intelligent brick, and here's my touch sensor. And when I select an object, say for example the intelligent brick, by left clicking, the selection highlighting changes to this teal color. And what I can do now is actually pull this brick off of my model. You can see that LEGO Digital Designer knows where the snaps are for the various components. So as I position this brick, we can see that I get, again, the green selection highlighting from the various cross axles here, just showing me that this is an eligible connection point for my intelligent brick. Okay. So it's quite easy to work in LEGO Digital Designer, and that's really the magic of it all, is that normally it is a very involved process, to say the least, to construct a 3D model, and here we can do it in quite an intuitive and effortless way. So the basic components here on our screen, if we spend a little bit of time addressing the GUI, is, as we can see here, we have a brick palette on the left. I have my familiar Windows commands here at the top. So for example, I can go back to the welcome screen, save my project, undo and redo over here. And then we have our toolbar options up here. And we'll be discussing these commands a little later in the video. The very last part, and perhaps the part that makes this tool so magical, is not only that I can export my models from LEGO Digital Designer and bring them into the simulator, but LEGO Digital Designer actually generates a set of building instructions, and we'll see that in a future video. So let's create a new project here. I'm going to go to my welcome screen. I'm not going to save the changes that I've made to this particular model, and I'm going to free build. Now, one of the things we can do to make our life easier, especially if we're interested in building a physical model at some point, is we can limit our palette to just the bricks in a particular kit. So if you look at the side of your Mindstorms box, you'll see a number. And if I come to this filter bricks by boxes icon, you can see that all of the available permutations of the Mindstorms product are here. Now, the kit that I happen to be working with right now is an older Mindstorms Next G education kit. So I'm going to use this 9797 base kit just to demonstrate. And you can see that when I click on this, all of a sudden my palette changes, right? So now I'm just limited to the bricks that are available within the 9797 kit. If I want to build a minifigure, which we're all familiar with, I can simply expand on that particular library. We can see that in the 9797 kit, it comes with one minifig. So I'm going to click on his legs, drag it out. It might be difficult to see, but there's actually a set of directional arrows that are beside my mouse. And what that's telling me is that I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to play with the positioning of this element. So let's put our legs down. We're going to give them a upper body. You might need that. And you can see that, again, as I zoom in and move the upper body to the legs, that we get that selection highlighting telling us that this is an available connection point for these two elements. I'm going to give him a head. It'd be kind of creepy to not give him a head. And again, we'll talk about the toolbar a little later on, but I'm just going to turn his head around. And we'll give him a fashion accessory because he's a cool dude. And that is how easy it is to build with LDD. Now, you'll recall that there's only one of these minifigures that ships with the 9797 kit. So you'll see here that, well, as I was positioning parts for my brick palette, that there's actually a count. So in this particular example, we've used these pieces. Now, that's not to say that I can't build additional minifigures. I can certainly do that. But as we build these additional characters, we're going to start seeing a negative count. And that is because, well, this is digitally possible. I'm using more pieces now than we normally have available to us within the box. So here you can see that I am -2 for each of these pieces because I have no way of building these extra characters in real life. I think that aspect of LEGO Digital Designer could be an incredibly useful utility for first LEGO League teams and World Robot Olympiad teams when you're trying to come up with a design, but you're limited to just a set number of parts in a box. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the tabs, applying filters, and we've built ourselves a minifigure. What we're going to talk about now are the tools on our toolbar, and some of these tools admittedly are a little more intuitive to use than others. So let's take a look at what exists up here. The very first tool on our toolbar is the single selection tool, and you can see that in the text that's popping up here on the icon, that I can use the V key as a shortcut. So I can either click on the item I want to move, or if I happen to be in a different command, I can press V and the single selection tool shows up. If I want to select multiple elements, I simply move over to this next button here. And you can see that I have a little plus sign next to my cursor, so I can actually go and highlight a collection of pieces and then move them. A shortcut for that, if you're interested, is I can actually, with the single selection tool, hold down the control key. And again, when I press this control key, you can see that I get the little plus sign, and that's going to allow me to add multiple components to my selection. What else do we have here? Connected selection tool. You know, I've never had a good reason to use this, but let's see how it looks. As you might have guessed, when I select, say for example, my minifigure's hands, if I have the connected selection tool going for me, it's going to select the whole minifigure, right? Everything that is connected to this hand. I can use a color selection tool, so I'm going to hit escape to break out of the selection here. And I'm going to use the color selection tool, and say for example I just wanted to pick all the flesh colored pieces. So in this case, my guess is if I pick his head, it's also going to pick his arms and his hands. And we see that that's the case. I have a shape selection tool, which, as we might have guessed, if I pick an object here, it's going to pick anything that resembles that shape. So in this particular case with the hat, it's not going to find anything, but if I choose the hand, it's going to find the other hand. And then closely related to that is the color and shape selection tool, which will pretty much do the exact same thing in this case. If I select this hand, it's going to select the other hand because they match in both color and shape. Rounding out our selection tools here is the invert selection, which will select everything but what you've clicked. So here everything is selected because I haven't clicked on anything. Now if I click on the hat and I choose invert selection, it's going to select everything but the hat. So in practice, I usually only use the single selection tool and the multi-selection tool, but if you come up with a good reason for needing these other options here, I'd be happy to hear how you're using them. So as you can imagine, it would be very tedious to have to build multiple minifigures in this way. If I just revisit what I've just done here, there is a better way of doing this, and that is I can use what's called the clone tool. The clone tool will essentially create a copy of whatever I have selected. So I'm going to press the C key on my keyboard, it's the shortcut. And what we're going to get here is anything that I select, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a window selection. It's going to build a copy, and then it's going to build another copy. And before I know it, I have an army of minifigures with a cool and charismatic leader up front. If I press the H key, I get something called the hinge align tool, and it works in a couple of different ways. Let's take a look at the hands, because essentially they are hinges. Here I can rotate the hand. You can see that there are two other graphical inputs. I can either use these snaps here, so I can see if I can try and move this counterclockwise. We also get a set of X, Y, and Z coordinates that we can use to position our the angle of our hinge. So for example, let's get out of here and choose the hat. Instead of using 90, I can make single point changes, and here I'm very gradually changing how this hat is aligned to the head of my minifigure. The hinge align tool was one of my most hated tools when I was learning how to use this piece of software, and I struggled for a very long time to find a good example of how to use it. When you know how to use it, it can be a very powerful tool to have, especially with more complex creations. So let's take a look at why we would want to use this tool at all. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to break out of my filter here. So I'm going to move out to the more generic Mindstorms palette. We're going to see that when I do that, my brick palette expands. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a set of Technic beams. It doesn't matter which ones I use, so I'm just going to pick this 7M beam, looks okay. I'm going to use the C key to make a clone of it. And what I'm going to use is my arrow keys just to set this up right. I'm going to come back to my friction pegs here. So these are the things that make it all hold together, the glue that holds everything together. Let's find a friction peg that I want to use. This actually has a connection peg. Let's see what I have here. Here's a friction peg. This is what I'm looking for, these things. Okay, so I'm going to put a friction peg over here. I'm going to hold the control key and grab the friction peg in the Technic beam and just pull it a little back. I'm going to hold the C key and clone my friction peg and put it up here. And then lastly, I'm going to grab this Technic beam at the bottom and I'm going to connect it like so. So the way the hinge align tool works is here what we can see is our two Technic beams are aligned on one hinge, but I want this piece to go up to here where this second friction peg is. If I click on the hinge align tool or hold Shift and H to select that tool, I'm going to get a set of arrows. So it's going to ask me what is my starting point, in other words, what is the thing that I wish to move, and it's going to be this Technic beam. And I want to move the back of this Technic beam to snap with this top friction peg, and I'm going to click that as my go-to point. When I do that, we can see that the two Technic beams are now aligned. Of course, I can hit Control Z or Z and then or click on the undo button here, and we could do this the other way around. Perhaps I want to take this friction peg with my hinge align tool and I want it to align with this Technic beam at the bottom. And let's just change our view so we can see this happen. And our Technic beams align like so. Closely related for frustration is the flex tool. Now the good news, I don't know if it's good news or not, but the good news is that there's not a lot of flexible components in the Mindstorms kit. That's been my experience across both the older NXT robot and the new Mindstorms EV3. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to get out of my filters entirely. I'm going to remove this filter so I have an expanded palette. And we're going to take a look at how flexible components work in LEGO Digital Designer. Now, it's worth mentioning that not every component is flexible. I mean, a good many of them are rigid, but there are things like tubes and pipes that can be bent. And I'm just going to find some examples here of flexible components. You can see here at the top of my brick palette that I can enter in a name of a component. So if I start typing the word flex, for example, and I expand one of these libraries, see all of these pieces here that have what looks like the breast cancer awareness ribbon. That little ribbon is there to tell you that these components can be bent, right? Whereas these components that don't have that ribbon cannot be bent. Now the piece that I particularly want to demonstrate here is I'm going to use something called a spiral tube. And if I spell, I guess I have to spell spiral correctly, that helps. There we go. For those of you who are from First LEGO League, you'll recognize these tubes because frequently the minifigures and various props on an FLL mat use these tubes as a way that your robot can grab and control the different game elements. So I'm going to take my tube and let's put her over here. Now with the flex tool selected, I can grab my bendy piece here and bend it so that it connects to my rigid 1x1 square here. And that is the magic of the flex tool. Again, there's not a lot of flexible pieces in the Mindstorms kit, so this might not be a factor, but it is pretty cool nonetheless to see. Beside it here is the paint tool. If you use the paint tool and we select something, so let's pick one of our Technic beams here, you can see that in certain cases, depending on the set you're using, elements might come in different colors. So if I wanted to mix up the colors, you'll notice here that I can't just pick any color. I can only use the official colors, right? These are pieces that actually exist in the LEGO kingdom. You'll notice there's no hot pink or green. We would have to go into that extended designer palette to see that. Let's just see if this tab over here. In this tab, we can work with all sorts of custom pieces. And here we can see we have a much greater palette of colors to choose from. Okay. Let's see, let's come back here to a sample project. The next tool in our arsenal here is the hide tool. And the hide tool can be particularly useful when you have a rather complex creation with lots of things happening in it. So we can see in this particular Mindstorms robot that there's an undercarriage here with various gears and an assembly, and it's very difficult to see that from this perspective. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to click on these pieces and hide them, and you can see that I can expose the undercarriage of my robot in this way if I want to see how these pieces come together. Now, the hide tool does not delete these elements. They're simply hidden. You can see our little Lego minifigure here says show all hidden bricks. I'm going to give that a click, and you can see that everything returns. Now, that's not the case with the delete tool. When you click on the delete tool, you really are removing it forever. There's a bunch of different ways you can delete things. I can click up here on my toolbar. You'll notice I get a big X now beside my cursor, and now I'm permanently deleting pieces. Of course, I can undo or Control Z and get my pieces back. I can also, if I'm just in my normal cursor here in single selection mode, if I select a piece, I can press the delete key on my keyboard, and that will do the exact same thing. So there you have it. That is the basics of working in LEGO Digital Designer. In the videos ahead, we'll actually go through a real-life build using a sample robot that I've been given permission to use from Robots to DOS. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.